molds that are cast. And Dwayne Hansen would do super real pieces that would look like that. And so, but George, anyway. The Baroque period, 17th and 18th centuries, we're talking about the age of the kings. And the kings were all powerful, and in many ways, when the Counter-Reformation started, it gave them a power to break away from the Catholic Church. Although the French stayed Catholic, the king was able to trump the power of the Pope. But that only was made possible because England had completely broken away, because who needed a divorce?
The king.
The king, and what was his name?
Henry VIII.
Henry VIII. And one of his wives' children was called Mary, right? His first wife, and she was known as Bloody Mary because she wanted to make the religion Catholic again. And remember, she had 3 blind people, based on that poem, The Three Blind Mice, executed because they'd saved money, bought a Bible, and hired somebody to read it to them. And so she had them murdered. And so this is a very interesting period. But remember, the art here is really pushed forward by the fact that the Catholic Church wants to get their members back and make the church interesting. So make the art more exciting. And so it becomes really exciting. And Bernini shows that here in this figure. The great sculptor Borromini really activates the front of these buildings to make them work. Then you have artists like Caravaggio, who is going to have a tremendous impact. And if you go to the Getty right now, I think it's the LA County, you would see 100 pictures influenced by him. And these paintings, some of them like his, is almost 10 foot by 7 foot. This one here is 6 foot by 5 feet, and Jernaleski was influenced by him. And these are all active, very, very violent, a lot of color, all typical examples of what was going on in the Baroque period. And when you look at the Vietnam War period, the art that Siegel is that man's name, George Siegel. When you look at his, is pretty placid and pretty still, but when you look at the artwork in the late 60s, it's all quite violent and quite exciting. And so it reflects the period of the Vietnam War. Here again you see Peter Paul Rubens, and this one is The Rising of the Cross. He did 3 of those. And remember, the big problem in France was they were consuming all of the capital in their beautiful estate and their wonderful building there at Versailles. And the Hall of Mirrors is just this little section right here. And you can see how long the building is, but just this little section right here is the Hall of Mirrors. And of course, this is the inside of the Hall of Mirrors, which is really spectacular. And of course, one of the great painters of this period is Velázquez. And remember, he was knighted by the king. He's down in Spain. Rembrandt in the north, the artists are going to be painting portraits, still lifes, florals, and landscapes. So they will do some religious paintings, but they're commissioned, not by the church, because the Protestants didn't want any art in their church because they didn't want to look like they were Catholic. So one of the great painters was Rembrandt. This is his wife, Saskia. Then you have Vermeer at that time. You have Judith Lister, who is a female painter, and they do all of these humorous bar paintings. If you can't go to church, might as well go to the bar. And so there's some really fun, wonderful paintings that deal with the activities that are going on there. And some of them get a little bit vulgar, but they're just humorous. And paintings like, there was one painting I saw once, and this guy had a cartload of pots. He was taking them to sell. Well, somebody had run into the cartload of pots, turned them over. They were all broken over the street, and you had vendors selling hot dogs and sausages and all these things going on. It was like a wonderful fantasy tale to look at the picture. And everybody had a chaotic problem, and somebody was in the background preaching, and people were gathered around. And so these paintings told stories, they gave information, they were to be humorous, and people would buy them. Just like you buy comic books today, or just like you buy magazines today, or other things for your home, or like you would invest in different things. And of course, here's Rysdale and the typical landscape. Here's an inside of the typical French home, and they eat up a lot of money. And remember, here you have Watteau. You should be familiar with him, and then you should be familiar with Fragonard. And remember, these you're into the Rococo period. By that time, everything is so happy among the king and the people that the poor people are starving to death. Then you're going to have the David paintings, and he's going to represent Rembrandt, and they're not Rembrandt, but Napoleon, and they're going to try to make him the emperor, and of course that will fail. And so the revolution comes about. This is Marie Antoinette. Remember, all of these people were beheaded, so there was no stopping. And so that's like in Egypt right now, it's utter chaos, and some of these other places around the world. And here's Libram, and you should read about her, the great painting of Marat by David. And this was, remember, he's signing death warrants, but in this painting he's giving food orders. And of course the great artist and the guy that rode in the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. This is Paul Revere. He was a silversmith, and he was an artist. He did printmaking. Now, we talked about Islam, Muhammad. You should be familiar with Muhammad, and Mecca and Medina. You should be familiar with mosque and palaces and how they work. Which room is the prayer room? You should know about their books, what they write on their books, what they do with figures or don't do with figures. You should be familiar with African art. And what's the main theme of African art? The mask is the main objects that they do, but it's life after death, just like it was with Egypt, just like it's going to be in China. So there's a variety of the Benin and the different people and cultures. The beads are important, the sculpture pieces are important, the ornamentation, and remember that celebration of death is very, very crucial to them. And so be familiar with those. With India, you want to be familiar with Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa. The Buddhism comes out of India, but it won't stay in India. It moves to China. It's very important in China. The birth of Buddha, conceptual, immaculate conception, and stupas and are the buildings that house his ashes. Buddha statues, bodhisattvas, and then the Hindu religion. How many Hindu religious people are there? How many different gods? Only 330 million, because they all believe in interpreting it a separate and different way. So be familiar with the Mahideva, and be familiar with the Angkor Wat, and then Xi'an art, never left China. And then here you have the Mongol influence. Remember that this piece here was by a Mongol artist. Who's the greatest warrior of all warriors? Generals, Genghis Khan, and he was a Mongol. And then you move into China. Again, they're very interested in organizing and bringing together their country. The Emperor Qin, which is pronounced Chin, and that's where the word China comes from. He involved the people in 3 great projects: the soldiers, the imperial palace, and what else? And the Great Wall. And so you can read about the various different dynasties and be familiar with what's going on there. Japan then was highly influenced by China, and they had the Hanawa sculptures, and they brought in Buddhism, they brought in curry, they brought in the written Chinese language, and there are various different periods. They are influenced by Buddhism and nature, the ultimate end of being reincarnated to the point where you are part of nature. So nature becomes extremely important to them and very beautiful in how they depict it. Then we looked at the Pacific areas. We talked about the Australians, the Easter Island people. We talked about how they decorate everything, the ornamentation. We talked about Mesoamerica, Teotihuacan, the Olmecs, the Toltecs, with the feathered serpent, and then we looked at the importance of turquoise in this culture. And remember, in China it was what stone?
Jade.
It's jade. And we looked at Machu Picchu, and talked about the Native Americans and their need to decorate also. And then we looked at a little bit of the Indians and some of their wares. And then we picked back up with the neoclassic, and which we just barely finished that up. So you should be in pretty good shape. So if you came in late, I'll mark you here.
I'll email you the videos.
It's not too big to
Kylie,
Oh, I won't.
Elizabeth,